Merry Meet. I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin. And this is episode 24, the Throat Chakra. If you are here with me live, you can leave any questions or comments in the feed, and I'll make sure I'll get to them at the end. I'm just going to dive right in. We've got a lot to talk about today. Throat chakra is a big one, especially for those of us who are practicing magic or working on our magical or spiritual abilities. The throat chakra is called Vishuddha, sometimes Vishuddhi in Sanskrit. It translates to purification in some translations. Sometimes it is called particularly pure. This all speaks to this idea that this is a center that when we purify the body, we purify everything that's going on underneath it. It's a gateway that opens up the space above. So it is the first of our three spiritual chakras. So just briefly, our chakra system is split into three different pieces, at least the main chakras are. There are the lower three, the root, the sacral chakra, and the solar plexus. These have to do more with the physical body, the physical world around us. The heart is like the bridge between the lower and the upper energy centers. And then, of course, we have the upper three. This is the throat, the third eye, and the crown. Now, those of us who are magical practitioners, we're mostly interested in these, but it is important, as the throat chakra teaches us, to be working with the lower parts in order to make sure that we're optimally creating good energy in the body. So if we successfully work with all of our chakra system, then we have a body that is able to achieve these higher functions, these higher realms, and which is all of what we want, right? So the energy of our whole system has to be balanced, but it is always useful for us to look at each chakra in turn. So sound is really what this chakra is all about. So you think about just the word throat, right? When we hear it, we can even feel the vibrations underneath our fingers when we place our hand on the throat and we speak. So sound is really what can help us purify the body, and especially the throat chakra. So there is something called seed sounds. These are sounds that actually have not only meaning to them, but they have a ability to change the vibrations and therefore the energy in the body. Now, I'm going to be talking about this later, but for now, just know that the throat chakra, if you really want to know how to heal the throat chakra, a lot of it has to do with sound. So the throat is usually visualized as blue, a cerulean blue, in fact. So in the systems where people assign indigo to the color of the third eye, we usually visualize the throat as like an ocean blue, sky blue, cerulean blue, and not the indigo of the third eye. Now, there is a symbol for every chakra, and this one is the 16-petal lotus. So I brought a little picture of it here to show you. And these 16 petals, they all represent one of the 16 vowels of the Sanskrit alphabet. So again, this goes to show how important sound is when it comes to this particular energy center. Now, the throat is connected to the element of Akasha. That is the Sanskrit name. Now, in a more Western practice, like what most of us do, we would probably call this spirit, though there are traditions who do call it Akasha. In my own tradition, we call it Akasha as well, but we also use the word spirit. To us, it's often interchangeable. Now, as I mentioned, this is the bottom of the upper three chakras, of these three spiritual chakras. And here is where we begin to perceive the subtle vibrations that are from the etheric plane. Now, I'll talk about this more at the end when I talk about manifestation and creation. But the etheric plane is where our magic takes place. Most of our rituals take place. When I lead rituals myself, especially when they're online, if you've ever been to one of my rituals, you know that I'll tell you that we're entering the etheric plane. So this is a space that's actually between the worlds, and it allows us to create much there that we could not create otherwise. So the throat, that when we begin to perceive those subtle vibrations by connecting to our throat chakra, it gives us access to the etheric plane in a way that we wouldn't normally have had. Hence why the throat chakra is so important. Now, I did want to mention something called entraining. I think this is such an interesting idea, and it helps to explain vibrations. A lot of you, I know, you can pick up vibes from different people and places and situations, and sometimes they're positive and sometimes they're negative. And entraining really helps explain why that happens. So all of our waves are energy, sound waves, just like any waves, are energy, and they vibrate at certain frequencies. Now, what happens during entrainment is that the waves begin to have a sympathetic vibration. So what this means is when waves are of a similar frequency, they can actually lock into phase with one another. That means that they begin to vibrate at the same rate. Now, if two vibrations are close enough, they'll do what we call entrain. And if they're too dissimilar, though, what they will do is they're going to create dissonance. So this can help explain why you might feel disharmony around certain people or certain places because their vibrations are just not similar enough to yours. Now, when we open up the throat chakra, we're much more likely to be able to entrain, which means that we can fall in rhythm with the energy that's around us, especially those higher spiritual vibrations, which is what takes us to the etheric plane and which allows our magic to become that much bigger. It reaches to farther places and just adds that extra boost and power to our magic. This is really how we can accelerate our practice. Now, the basic idea here is that through chanting, through mantras, through seed sounds, all of which I'm going to talk about at the end when I talk about attunement practices, we can refine the throat chakra. Now, not only that, though, there's an extra bonus is that we begin to calm the mind and we begin to purify the body, all of which allows us access to the upper centers. Now, the throat is the gateway between the unconscious and the conscious. So for those of you who are on a shadow working path, this plays a big role for you. The throat is one that you definitely want to work with. Because when blockages occur here, what that means is that ideas and energy cannot pass from the unconscious into the conscious mind, and that's what we need in order to do our shadow work. Now, the throat chakra is also a center of self-expression. So what it does is it acts as a gateway between the inner voice or the inner world and the outer voice and the outer world. This is how we convey who we are to the world. And unfortunately, we live in a world that doesn't always allow us to express ourselves the way that we need to. And in fact, I believe that there's a collective blockage of the throat chakra of the basically in the collective. And what this does is it allows, or it keeps certain people and individuals from actually being able to express themselves. Now, within our own communities, there's a lot of this that happens. Many of us have to stay in the broom closet out of fear. There's also a collective fear about our own ancestry. And so when we have ancestors, even if this is unconscious, who suffered because they were different, because they had abilities of some kind, then this all gets entrenched in us as well. So this is like where some ancestral work can take place. But the other thing is, within our own community, there's also a collective fear that we sometimes will call the witch wound. Some people will call that, there's different definitions of what that means. But in my opinion, it has a lot to do with this idea that it was not safe to be able to be who you were at certain times. And this we carry with us inside of us, even in the present day. So even if we feel safe to express ourselves now, we still carry that trauma with us. So this is why the throat chakra is a big one for all of us. Now, that is the unconscious side of it. The conscious side of it is there are those of us who actually do have a fear of being discovered for who we are, and that keeps many of us in the broom closet and stifles our ability to self-express. Now, psychologically, the throat, it develops around the ages of 7 to 12. So if the heart space develops well and we have a trust in our caregivers and those around us in our relationships, then we have the trust that we can express ourselves and speak our truth. But much damage can occur here, especially in these years. Because if there's any trauma or abuse, we're going to have issues with the throat chakra, especially if there are lies or mixed messages that were sent to us when we were in that critical time period, secrets that were kept in the family, excessive criticism. When children are living in a constant state of fear, this closes off the throat. It blocks them from expressing their truths and expressing who they are. It bottles up their emotions. And we fear what might happen if we truly were to open up. This creates a tremendous amount of guilt and shame within children. And it feels like our feelings are flawed, right? So if we're not listened to as children, we also pick up this idea that our feelings don't matter and what we have to say doesn't matter. And then this further shuts down the throat. So a bit of my own story, I was a very emotional child and my family was not. And so there was never really any expression of emotion. And so when I would cry, it was looked at like there's something wrong with me. And so I remember I would hide in my room and I would try to stifle, my feelings until I could get into a place where I could express them. If I locked myself maybe in the room or the closet or the bathroom. And I remember it would feel like there was a knife that was just going through my throat. And when I was a kid, I had no idea that what this was blockages, and stuck energy in my throat chakra. So now when I studied chakras and I learn more about this, when I start to feel that pain in my throat, I know that there's something that I'm stifling. Now, the demon of this chakra is lies. So every chakra kind of has this demon or this blockage or this thing that has to be kind of worked through. So here is lies. So lies in general are going to cause damage to the throat chakra. And when I say damage, I don't mean that it's going to be irreversible. We, of course, can do work to balance it again. But what happens here is the lies, the truths, the exaggerations that we tell, they're all going to impact us in some way. Now, some will do more harm than others, and it's always important to note, is the lie, the exaggeration, what I'm doing, what I'm saying, is it hurting me? Is it helping others? There's these pros and cons to it. So I realize that there are white lies that sometimes we have to tell because they protect us or they protect others. But it's just important for us to note that no matter when we tell an untruth, there's going to be some kind of impact on the throat. And whether we want to believe that or not. So the real question we want to ask ourselves is, are the lies that we're telling, the exaggerations, the untruths, how are they impacting us? And if we think that they're necessary, we can then do some throat chakra work to try to work on, getting that energy more balanced here. Because I agree, sometimes it's not always possible to be honest all the time. Now, there are, like all chakras, there are deficient energies within them and there are excessive energies. And I'm going to just, before I even start going through the deficient and the excessive energies in this one, I just want to say that this chakra, more than any probably, it's very common for people to have excessive energy and deficient energy in this chakra at the same time. Now that goes for all of them. So if you've watched some of the other episodes and I've gone through all the lists of the deficient traits and the excessive traits, and you have some on both lists, that's very common. It's especially true in this one. Now, in a deficient display of energy in the throat, the person will usually have a weak, kind of airy, pinched voice, difficulty speaking. I notice that when my voice gets really hoarse, that's usually an indication to work on this chakra for me. Now, people who have deficient energy here may let others dominate the conversation, and you may feel self-conscious and shy about being able to express yourself, and may be good in conversations in some places, but not in others. So that's where we're talking about, like, you can be deficient here sometimes, but not all the times. There may be difficulty getting the thoughts out, translating through the voice, difficulty putting feelings into words, and there can be a fear of speaking. And this is not usually the fear that the majority of people have of like public speaking. It's like just a fear of, being able to talk at all. Now, in the excessive display of this chakra, the people may talk in defense. You may feel like you need to talk over in order to be heard. So this can happen in some situations. So when there's excess of energy, there's the need to kind of control the conversation and the direction that it takes. And you'll also notice when the energy here is excessive that if it's you who feels like it's excessive or you're noticing it in someone else, the person will talk a lot but not really say much. And you've probably met people like that who there's just a lot of talking going on, but there's really not much like message that's being conveyed. This is really about filling up space in a lot of ways. There's also an inability to listen, maybe constant interruptions, gossiping, there may be a loud, shrill voice too, so it can be kind of a grating voice to the ears. And like I said, it's quite common to have an excessive energy and a deficient energy in this chakra at the same time. Because we can communicate well in some places, but not in others. That's probably true for a lot of us. Now, physically, so those are all like the more of the, outside of the voice, a lot of these were more of the psychological manifestations. There's also physical manifestations of this chakra. So there can be disorders of the throat. So anytime that there's anything going on with the throat itself physically, what that means is there's also something going on energetically. So I've said this in other episodes. It doesn't mean that there isn't a physical cause. And just because there is a physical cause doesn't mean there can't be an energetic one as well. Because the physical body and the energetic body, they lay on top of each other like sheaths, one covering the other. And so there's because they're so interconnected, it's really impossible to not have them both operating at the same time. So anytime the throat is sore, like I said, when my voice gets hoarse, this is all an indication there's something also going on energetically. Anything going on with the ears will also be connected to the throat, the neck as well. TMJ is a big one. I'm a TMJ sufferer, so if you have that too, this is definitely an indication that the throat is a place that you want to put some attention. Hearing problems are also connected here. So if you have any issues with your hearing, issues of the thyroid and the parathyroid, every chakra has a gland that's associated with it, and this is the thyroid and the parathyroid. So this is going to be an indication, if you have issues there, that the throat is something to work on. And in fact, when people are trying to work with their thyroid gland, perhaps they're trying to maybe have hypothyroidism or something, one recommendation is to do poses, yoga poses that involve the neck. And I'm going to talk about a few of those at the end. Also, people who have throat chakra issues may get a lot of colds and coughs as well, more than most people. So all of that is kind of the negative part. It shows us, is the throat chakra one that we need to work with or not? And so I want to move now into the positive, which is if you feel like you were checking off some things on these lists, then here's what we can do about it. Here's how we can improve. And just keep in mind too, like I said, there is a collective issue with the throat chakra of the collective. And so I think all of us could use some work here. And I'm going to talk at the end too what we can do in ritual as well to kind of support ourselves. So correspondences are always great when we're working with the chakras, especially for witches or magical practitioners. We love correspondences. So you can use any of these to create a ritual if you would like. So as I mentioned, the element is the fifth element of spirit, sometimes called Akasha. The planet that's associated with the throat is Mercury, and the metal is also Mercury. There are deities that are associated with the chakra. They're usually separated into the Hindu deities and then all of the pantheons, and that's just because the chakra system comes from India, and so the Hindu deities are the ones that were written about first. So the two big ones here are Sarasvati. She is a goddess of music, art, wisdom, knowledge, teaching, learning. She's great to call upon for if you're doing higher learning, higher education, and if you're a musician or an artist, but she's wonderful for the throat chakra. The other goddess is Ganga. Now, she is what the river Ganges is named after, And so what's very interesting about her is that she's the goddess of purification. But if you know anything about that river, it is actually one of the most polluted rivers in the entire world. And to me, this shows that kind of collective disassociation from nature. So like we have we pollute all of our water, and we pollute our land and everything, but this river that's supposed to be the symbol of purification, that is associated with a goddess of purification, is now one of the most polluted waterways in the world. Other deities are Hermes, the muses. So we're going to see a lot of deities here that have to do with the voice, singing, communication, creativity. Besides Hermes, you would also have Mercury as the Roman counterpart. Apollo, Breed is a great one. Now she's good for for other chakras as well. She's good for the sacral chakra, which is also associated with creativity. So those are deities you can work with, but that list is not exhaustive. Though it is interesting is if you Google deities for the throat chakra, you actually find a lot less than you do for the other chakras. So kind of interesting to me. Now, the herbs that are associated with this chakra are frankincense, benzoin, and mace. Those are three really good ones. You can use any of those for incense if you want. Minerals are anything of a blue color, turquoise, aquamarine's a great one, celestite. I love lapis lazuli and sodalite for the throat chakra, especially. Now, let's dive into some attunement practices. So the attunement practices are what we can do in order to balance this chakra. So if you already know you've got imbalances here, this is all for you. And this is also for everybody, though. All of these things are going to be beneficial to anyone because, again, as that kind of gateway here between the unconscious and the conscious and the inner world and the outer world, and in that beginning, that gateway into these upper energy centers, this is a really important one to make sure that we have it optimally functioning. Now, one thing that you can do physically is you can loosen up this area physically, okay? So neck massage, you can do this on your own, just kind of getting in here. One thing that I love to do is to take a tennis ball and put it on a yoga block or like a big book. So like if you have like a Harry Potter kind of sized hardback book, put a tennis ball on top of that, and then you can lay down and you can get that ball into these really hard to reach places where there's a lot of deep tissue pain. Sometimes there'll be pain or there'll be like tightness in these muscles, and you could just get into the neck that way. You can also do neck exercises, very good. It could just be as simple as just turning the left ear down to the left shoulder, and then back to the other side. Slow neck circles. If you have any neck issues, just be a little cautious here, and you probably don't want to go all the way back like this. Though one thing that is, if you don't have any pain when you do that, one thing that can be really good for the throat is tipping the head back so that the throat really opens. This actually can be really vulnerable feeling for people, and if you do that and it feels really vulnerable, it's a good indication that the throat is something you want to work with. Now, you can release your voice in various ways. So I saw someone earlier, I hadn't even thought of this, but they said primal screaming is a great way. Screaming, if you can't scream, you could scream into a pillow if you need to like kind of keep it muted, but just really activating the voice in any way that you can will work with this chakra. Singing, chanting, intoning sounds is really great. So just, find a song that you love and do that. Storytelling is very good here. So being able to tell your story to people, and maybe it's in person, maybe it's online. I would definitely recommend, though, trying to tell it using your voice and not just writing it down. So while writing it down is a way to kind of work with the throat because you are expressing yourself, we really want to do something physically because, again, remember what I said in the beginning, that vibration of the throat, when we feel those vibrations under our hands, that's the energy that we're trying to activate here. Automatic writing is a great thing to try. I've talked about this in a previous episode, and I'm actually going to talk about it next, not next week, but in a couple of weeks when we do the third eye, I'm going to talk about automatic writing more. But automatic writing is a way that you can, so some say, it's spirits will kind of, you allow your body, your hand to be kind of a conduit to receive messages from the other world, from spirits. Some people say they're coming from your own higher self. So if that's something interesting to you, I will be talking about that in a couple of weeks. You can practice silence if you think that your throat is excessive. Then practicing silence is a good one. And for everybody, I think active listening is really good. So really trying to, when you're talking to someone, really trying to listen to what they're saying. A lot of times what happens to all of us, for most of us, is that when someone is talking, we're immediately waiting for the moment that we can talk, or we're in our mind, we're thinking about what we're going to say when they're finished speaking. But if instead we just fully try to be present and we listen to what they're saying, rather than thinking about our response or ourselves at all, we really can train ourselves to be better as active listeners. There's also a really cool exercise that I learned when I was in my yoga training, my first yoga training, and we're actually going to do it in our membership eventually, but it's where you basically you listen to someone, but you don't really give any feedback, so there's no like communication on your part, so no nodding and smiling, all these things that we do, we're always constantly trying to be part of the communication, but you just give people space to just talk, and you literally just listen, because that's all you're going to do for the 2 or 3 minutes that they talk, is you just listen to them. So it can be a really neat exercise, and then when the timer goes off and the 2 or 3 minutes are up, then you switch, and then it's your time to just kind of talk about anything. It's kind of your space to just speak, and then the other person gets to practice that active listening. Mantras are really great for this chakra in particular. Now, mantras, to me, should not be confused with affirmations. So affirmations are things like, I am able to express myself creatively. I have no trouble speaking my truth. Those would be what I call affirmations. So those are great. I didn't always like them, but I think there's great power in them. Mantras, on the other hand, if we really are looking at what the definition of them is, to me, I consider these specific words that are put together. I use a lot of mantras that are in Sanskrit, because Sanskrit is a vibrational language. And so not only is there meaning in the words like there is in all languages, but there's actually a vibratory energy in the sounds of the language. So we talked about those 16 vowels that they have. There's this energy within each of those. So mantras are typically in Sanskrit, at least the ones that I've used, and there's a great power in them because some of these have been sung or repeated for thousands of years. And so when you do them yourself, you tap into that energy. So remember, we were talking about entraining in the beginning, where you kind of vibrating with the same energy as someone or something around you. That's the idea here with the mantras. So there's a similar idea with seed sounds. Seed sounds are a lot easier to use. Mantras can be kind of complicated. You don't have to learn the language that they're in, but you at least have to learn how to pronounce the sounds correctly. Seed sounds are a lot easier because it's just one sound and not a big verse of words. So the seed sounds are so fantastic because this one little syllable has all this ability to change a vibration within you through that process of entraining. Now, the seed sound for the throat chakra is spelled H-A-M, but it's pronounced hum because of the difference of vowels between our language and Sanskrit. So it goes hum. And so what you can do is you can intone these sounds. So it would just be like hum. And you can do that for a couple of minutes, and that will immediately activate the energy in the throat. And some people find really great benefit from it just doing that alone. So I would suggest like a minute or two. Now, there are different seed sounds for all the different chakras, but that is the best one. That is the one for the throat. Besides that, there is also Brahmari breath. There's different breaths that you can use. Brahmari breath is one of the best ones, and I'm pretty sure I've taught it in a video before. Brahmi breath's pretty easy though. You just close your ears and then you make a buzzing sound. Brahmi is actually the goddess of bees. So this is why we call it the bee's breath. And so you just close your ears like this. And then you just intone that for a couple minutes. When you finish, when you kind of run out of air, take a breath and you start again. So that can be another great way to really get the throat activated. And I will tell you too, it's a really good breath to try when you have to tell someone something that's going to be hard to say, or if you're kind of maybe you have to give a speech or something and you're nervous about it, try that breath right before. And it's really good at helping with our communication. And another thing you can use are bells or singing bowls. So I just brought a bell here. This is actually, I got this one at I think Pagan Pride Day years ago. So these bells are really good during ritual. And you don't have to have one fancy like this. It doesn't have to hang from something, but you do generally have to have something you can hit it with because you usually can't do it with your finger. So bells can be really good. Singing bowls are also great. I'm hoping to save up for a set that's for all the chakras. This is just a general singing bowl. They usually have to be on something soft in order to work. And there are different ones that are made from different materials and crystals, and they have a different tone depending on the chakra that you want to work with. So singing bowls can also be really good. So I wanted to end here. Oh, a few yoga poses though. So I mentioned earlier anything with the neck, so neck exercises, neck rolls. Shoulder stand is a good one. It's a fairly complicated pose, but there are variations of it for beginners. Plow pose, again, kind of a complicated, more advanced pose, but you can find some ways to get into it easier for beginners. Fish pose, and interestingly enough, hip openers are very good for the throat. And that seems kind of strange. Like, why would you work with your hips when you want to work with your throat? But there's this great interconnection between the hips and the throat, between the sacral chakra and the throat chakra. Both are creative energy centers. The throat is the more spiritual energy creation, so it's about spiritual creation. Well, the sacral chakra is more about physical creation, but they operate together. And in fact, something that's very interesting as well is that the muscles of I believe of the larynx are very similar to the pelvic floor muscles as well. So it's very interesting. And so what they say is that when you have tight muscles in the neck, you generally have tight muscles in the pelvic floor as well. So working with these two energy centers hand in hand is really important. Now that leads me into kind of just the end here where we're going to talk about creativity and manifestation. So as I mentioned, the throat chakra is the second creative energy center, the first being the sacral chakra. So the sacral chakra is more about, our physical creation, and the fifth chakra, the throat chakra, is more about spiritual creation. Now, this is a force that truly makes manifestation possible. Now, I know that word manifestation is a word that not everybody likes. Sometimes witches don't like it because there's a lot of people who have read The Secret or different things like that, and they teach manifestation. It's not quite what we're doing when we're doing witchcraft. So I like to use the word because I think it's a very useful word, but just know I'm not talking about that kind of manifestation. So our manifestation is really like about the magic that we do, the creation that we make that brings things from the etheric plane and produces them here in the physical plane. So when our throat chakra is not working optimally, we cannot express ourselves well enough, externally, and this is to reflect what is happening internally. So basically what happens is we can't get our ideas. So like everything that's inside of us that knows what we want to create and manifest, we can't get it out properly. And this makes it harder for us to manifest. So it's so interesting that in so many creation myths, there was actually the world was actually sung or spoken into being, into creation. And if you even look at the Bible, that is what the beginning is, the word became flesh is what it actually says. So God spoke the words and man was made, at least in the Christian myth. But the Christian myth is not the only one where this happens. So this shows us that creation does come from this throat chakra. It suggests that this is the gateway for our manifestation. So what can we do? So there are ways that we can bring the throat chakra into our rituals. So how about bringing in songs and chants? So this is something that I realized a while ago. There's such great power in these songs and chants, especially when I'm leading rituals online where people are isolated in their own homes and we can't be together in person. But if we can join together in song or in chanting, all of a sudden we have a connection. But not only that, we're activating the throat chakra, which means that we are working with this gateway that really opens us up to what's beyond. Now, we can also loosen the neck and the jaw before doing rituals, like opening the mouth up wide and closing it, yawning, making noises. That would be really useful to try before magical workings because, again, it's going to get that throat chakra activated. You can also consider calling in the fifth element of spirit into your rituals. If you work with the elements, so let's say you work with the four earthly elements, air, fire, water, and earth, but maybe you don't always work with spirit, consider calling that one in too, because that's going to bring the energy of Akasha into the ritual, which again will help with the throat, will help kind of open that space up, open that gateway up for you. Now, I wanted to talk just for a minute. I wanted to share with you a little story about what happened to me and how I realized that my throat chakra needed work. So I have known for a long time that I have sacral chakra and solar plexus chakra issues. So I developed an eating disorder at 13 years old. I had it like for a very long time. I was hospitalized a couple of times. So I was well aware that those two chakras were ones that those were mine to work on in this lifetime. And so when I was at Pantheacon, I looked this up actually last night so I could actually get the name of the workshop I went to and the name of the woman who did it. But I was at Pantheacon. This was 2015 was the year, so 7 years ago. And for those who don't know, Pantheacon is it doesn't exist anymore, though I think that it's kind of changed names and they're trying to revive it under a different name. But it was a big festival where pagans would go. It was like a 3 or 4 day festival up in San Jose. And some of the big speakers like Christopher Penczak and Christopher Hughes Starhawk, she was always there, Orion Foxwood. And there'd be all these speakers and rituals you could go to, and it was like all day long. It was just like heaven. It was so nice. But there was a workshop, and it was called Tantric Shamanism Breathwork Ceremony. And this is before I was a yoga teacher, a breathwork teacher. I had no idea what any of this was, but one of the girls in my coven, she wanted to go to this workshop. And I think all the other girls, they ended up going to like the Discordians are always there, and they went to one of their rituals. But we decided to go to this workshop. And we had no idea what to expect. It had a little like eye symbol next to it, which meant that it was going to be experiential. So when we get in there, they make us all lay down on the floor and take your shoes off, lay down on the floor, get comfortable. There was this woman, her name is Sylvia Bralier. She was the leader, and then she had a bunch of these other people with her. And what they did is they took us through this kind of ceremony where there were singing bowls, and she was kind of leading us through this meditation. And it was just amazing because they kind of took us up through the chakra system, and you would hear people moaning and making noise when they would reach a chakra where they had some kind of a blockage. And so I remember, like, I was like, okay, my sacral chakra and my solar plexus, I know there's going to be some work here. So when I got there, I could feel like some kind of uncomfortable energy. And the whole idea here was, that we were releasing this energy, and Sylvia and the other workers would kind of come around, and I'm pretty sure that they had the singing bowls and they would come around and they would, do them over different parts of your body. But what I wasn't expecting is when we got to the throat, that knife just was stuck in my throat. I could just feel it. And it was like I couldn't breathe. I started to have trouble breathing. I was hyperventilating. I mean, I was in a panic. And thankfully, they were all prepared for this because other people were, kind of having issues with the different chakras. And some of Sylvia's workers would come around and then they would kind of soothe you energetically while you were working through it, like help you release it. And it was a mind-blowing experience for me. But it's the way that I realized that I had all this work to do on my throat. So even if, you don't have a lot of symptoms there, because I certainly didn't think I did, but sometimes we do have trapped energy in some of these places that we're not even aware of. So I just wanted to share that story with you. And if you ever have a chance to kind of do some kind of a working where they're going to take you through all the 7 chakras and kind of balance them, definitely consider doing it. It's going to be an eye-opening experience because sometimes you're going to find blockages you didn't know existed. All right, so I am going to sign off here in a second, but I did want to announce this is a very special episode next week. This is episode 25, and in celebration of that, I am going to do a class called Intro to Shadow Work, and it's going to actually be on Zoom. So instead of this being a Facebook Live, you will be able to come to the Zoom room with me and take the class with me there if you want. This will still be fed live, so if you're happy on the live, you can still see it live on Facebook Live. But if you want to come to the Zoom, you'll get an invite through the group to come to that. And if you're on my mailing list, you'll also get an invite through that as well. Now, this is the same workshop that I teach in my membership and I've taught to my coven. And up until now, it's only been available to those in the membership or in the coven. But I'm inviting you to come and join me for it. So this is an hour-long workshop where I'm going to take you through what is shadow work, what is the shadow, what are techniques that you can use, and you can learn all about shadow work, and then you can learn all about my new membership. And you can ask questions about anything you want because we'll have a Q&A at the end, a live Q&A. And like I said, this will then be fed through the Facebook Live to the page and to the group afterwards if you can't attend live. So during that time, I'm also going to tell you about the membership because we are opening the doors for it's going to be a total of 6 days at the end of the month. And if you are on the list, you will be able to get a chance to join early to ensure that you get a spot. Because I will say, I don't know how this happened, but there's 200 people who've told me that they're interested in the membership. We don't have anywhere near that many spaces to take 200 people this round. So it is going to be important to get in early. So if you want, come to that workshop. If you've told me that you're interested in the membership, you're already on my list. But if you're worried that maybe I didn't write you down, don't worry. You can tell me a second time. That's okay. Or if you didn't tell me yet and you are interested, make sure you get on my list. Because like I said, I'm actually going to open the membership up for the people on that list first. So they're going to get the first dibs. And then if there's any spots left, then we're going to open it up for the rest of the people. So I'm going to sign off now, but look later in this week, I'm going to put out an invite and I'll give you the Zoom link to come to that Intro to Shadow Work episode next week, which I'm really excited. I'm excited to get on live with people or on Zoom with people too and get to see people there. It's going to be really fun. Okay, so let me see if there's any questions here. And if anybody has any questions in the meantime, you can drop them here, you can DM me, you can email me and let me know. And until then, I will see you next time. Okay? Blessed be.